Carolina Dean is a new champion coming this month, so one of the June champions. She's a really interesting and unique mechanic when it comes to basking in the sun. Much like Frank the Tortoise, they do like a nice bit of sun to charge them up and be able to deliver more damage and indeed play into their abilities and kit. As a champion, she'll be available on the pre-release bundles on June 17th and available in crystals in June 26th as well as the arena. She's got 100% resistance to Incinerate, which of course makes it tricky if you want to bring Incinerate immune champions into this. A lot of time Incinerate immune champions are ones that do Incinerates themselves. I'm looking at you, Phoenix, Dark Phoenix, I think, could be wrong with that one, and Human Torch to name but a couple. I think there's more than that. Plasma? I think plasmas are different. Anyway, immune to special and power lock, cold snap and frostbite. Very handy, especially for special and power lock, because those things are a nuisance and Kabam seem to be putting out more champions that indeed play into that. She's got an indefinite instinct buff to parry non-contact attacks, which is great to counter the likes of Shuri, to name again one. There are many. Gains iridescence buffs by basking in the sunlight, and the sun appears throughout the battlefield. We'll see that in action in a second. She consumes iridescence to gain glancing buffs, inflict energy, vulnerability, and passive Incinerate. Of course, being one of these particular champions that has that immunity means that she could do a hazard shift depending on how you rotate. Here's a good example. Odin, pre-fight, and I think node 10, that's the node that I do in Alliance Wars at the moment, can be really handy for that. She's a Zola counter as well, so that's really good. Really good option there. Special attacks do burst damage per personal Incinerates, which is great as well. So let's see her in action. Of course, going against that Arnhem Zola fight right there. Building energy vulnerabilities is important. Basking in the sun, which you can see there. The sun is something you place down as like a on battlefield kind of thing that's going on, like an effect or mechanic. So you're like, oh, there's the sun there that's been placed or is there. So go and bask in the sun and build up. As soon as you're building up, then it's going to be beneficial. You can see the passive Incinerates have been placed. Go and bask in the sun a bit more. Stay in the block. Go and do a heavy attack charge there. Basking in the sun. As you can see, you're doing that effect there. Ramping up your heavy attack. Similar to Mordo. Mordo does something similar where you just kind of like you charge those fury buffs. So it's not completely like that, but it's similar. Also, the signature ability is able to take down champions that are, or they suppress the armor. I think it's pulverize. Yeah, there's pulverize right there that you can put on the enemies like a Mega Sentinel and anything that has an armor buff on them as standard that's a tech. And of course, unblockable specials makes them very tasty. So one of the big things that Kabam is saying is that she is all about that locations across the stage. Standing in it grants carrying iridescent buffs, which she can consume to activate her abilities. Standing in the sun also grants Caroline additional power and unblockable specials. So that's really cool. I do like the champion in the way that you are playing a little game on screen. If you're in the mood to kind of go like, oh, let's do some complex stage-based stuff and kind of like figure out placements, then that's cool. But if you're not interested in that stuff, then that can be a little bit problematic. Not every champion has to be for every single player. I just like it when Kabam do stuff that's kind of different, unique, different and unique. And I think that Rain's done a fantastic job with making this champion unique. So when I was writing down notes for the champion based on what's going to be put in a deep dive and kind of covered, I did note that she's like just really ease of use. Kabam say that this champion is an ease of use of like 2.5, but I think that this is more, she's easy to know how to play her. I guess it's trying to make sure you're in the right spots at the right time. Like they say, like Kabam have like tipped the champion based on Karate Mike's deep dive. He says, head for the sun you place on the battlefield and charge heavies in it, building buffs. Continue process and build to an SP2. Head for the sun and bask in it and throw SP2 to do passive Incinerates. Take special attack from the defender into the block to consume buffs and gain energy vulnerability. Finish enemy off with an SP2, which will do some burst damage, and if the enemy is still alive, throw an SP1. If awakened, the signature ability counters techs and armor buffs. That's the information that I noted down. Now this is from a live play that's on playing right now on screen that Rain's playing, but you can see the extent of, even if you're messing up, I'm messing up from a point of view of you're building up to an SP3, you're power gaining absolutely through the wazoo. Okay, so I've slowed down the process of like the how to play the champion. This is from the champion rotation that's advised by Kabam. You can see here going into a parry effect allows you to do what seems to be just like a build up of attacks, then go into like a heavy attack hold type method. Then you can see there you're in the sun, but you're then kind of building the iridescence, I think it is. That's the iridescence buff being built as you kind of also gain glancing. Whether this champion's going to be helpful on defense, we don't know. Time will tell. But basking in the sun as you do, building up those buffs, and being in the sun and throwing the special attack, which you can see right there, is beneficial. I don't know whether or not SP3 rotate will be advantageous if you are a double-edged liquid courage mastery user, but definitely from what you can see right here of the incinerate damage and the basking in the sun versus throwing the special attacks is going to lead to some just incredible damage from the passive incinerates, which hopefully we're going to see in a minute with like a nice SP2. So yeah, building up, like holding right there as you're kind of like holding the heavy and then basking in the sun. And if you're throwing the SP2, it's a nice combination because it's unblockable, it's straight unblockable. And you can see there the burst damage, that's nice. That's nice burstable damage right there as you then go an SP1 to finish off. So it's a nice kind of combination of this kind of SP2, I think it's SP2, SP2, SP1 type rotation. Either way, it's quite nice. How she becomes an annoying defender could be like on Solar Shield block. Whenever Carolina blocks a hit, she consumes iridescent buffs based on the blocked attack to grant herself a glancing buff. For the duration of the attack, the buff is removed if Carolina is struck. When the opponent glances against Carolina, damage is reduced by 85% and offensive ability action is reduced by 40%. So depending on what she's got, you could find her being a pest in defense, possibly. And Kabam say that it's very quickly shut down. Carolina's block is incredibly powerful as it can very quickly shut down devastating specials. Since the block only consumes buffs once per attack with multiple hits, this means basic and special attacks with ridiculous amounts of hits can also be glanced with ease. Just make sure you have the iridescence to spare when you use this ability, otherwise you'll be looking to get yourself back in the sun as soon as possible. I think the play maybe from if you're going up against her could be like, well, make sure that she doesn't bask in the sun, and how you lead her to that again is going to be tricky unless you're looking to shut down any of her weakness elements, which I assume there it is, buff control, like champions like Black Widow, Clairvoyant, anything that's able to suppress, but maybe even stagger based champions could be a real advantage. Like Juggernaut may be able to do this quite well. Even like the Nico that's coming in this month could be really good counters for that. So my biggest concern is about what the SP3 offers, because if you are looking to run double-edged liquid courage masteries, are you going to be looking to throw that more regularly? And Kabam say Carolina's SP3 does a great job of inflicting her incinerates en masse. While this is less optimal as far as damage goes, this is the superior option for dealing with defenders that shut down bursts of damage. Additionally, Intensify can assist with power gains and iridescence, which standing in the sun, making them more powerful. So you may look to do an SP3 rotation. It's not something that Kabam kind of put in that will kind of like how to rotate the champion, but it could be for longer fights, or it could be for very specific fights. And the very specific fights were that champions that shut down bursts of damage, being okay, well, you'll just do the SP3 rotation if that's the play. I guess one downside is the pulverize. You have to awaken a champion in order to benefit from this. I'm not saying it's like a deal breaker, but if you are looking to take on a Mega Sentinel, a Nimrod, any tech champion as an armor buff, and that's a conducive to, I don't know, stopping an auto block, for example, or any other effects, then at least what you could do is then shoot for that champion to be awakened at a later date, just for the utility factor of taking on some of these very interesting techs, and say you don't have an armor break based cosmic. you instead have to opt for, you know, a different scenario in this regard. A bit of an example of where that Incinerate burst damage comes from is from the Solar Infused Incinerates, which Kabam say here, like personal Incinerate passives deal X amount of energy damage depending on the progression, depending on the level, sorry. And then it's also during the special attack that it's the instant Incinerates for each personal Incinerate active, dealing a burst of X amount of damage per power bar sent. This is why SP2 rotations are kind of optimal for this one. Kabam say these Incinerates melt away your opponent's health exceptionally well. Since these bursts of damage are tied to 2 bars of power spent, you should be going for SP2. Yeah, there we go. As we said, for 10 of power burst. The ability also leads to special one dealing a lot of not insignificant amount of damage too. That's why Kabam have opted, when they're doing the recommendation, an SP2 to SP run rotation for damage potential. So we've very much scratched the surface with what this champion can do. I love the type of utility the champion has, mainly, and also immunities when it comes to special lock and immunity, and also the power lock immunity, I think it was immunity, and also the cold snap and frostbite immunity that the champion has. The mechanic of basking in the sun is unique and is new, and I like when stuff is like that. A lot of times with new champions coming in, I do think they're a bit kind of like copy paste on the past, and I'm not like, there are obviously on stage mechanics with different champions. You know, I'm looking at you, Silver Sable. I'm looking at you, Leader. I'm looking at you. There's so many champions out there that do have those particular stage-based things. But I do like the idea of cosmics. I do like the idea of, you know, big damage. But also I like the idea of, well, something that's just generally there. And you're like, okay, well, I'll just stand in the light there, charge myself back up again, and then throw some nice damage. There was some interesting recoil damage. I can't remember where that's from, but maybe that's something that's kind of there. And whether or not an SP3 rotation with Liquid Courage double-edged masteries could be the play for this champion as well, to kind of ramp up some more damage. We'll have to see, but I think definitely from what Kabam have advised with these SP2, SP1 rotation, you can definitely see a high amount of damage, some fun interactions with you being able to stand in the light and throwing some specials that are relatively unblockable when you do them. The final thing to say is I just think you'll need to understand spacing when it comes to where your champion is placed, where to put a parry, when to then charge your heavy attack to get those iridescent buffs, I think it is, and then of course like figure stuff out with, yes, placements. Spacing requirements is a big kind of play with this champion. Ease of understanding, 5. Ease of use, Kabam's 2.5. We'll have to see if that's really the case. And also the type of mystics that you might be bringing as counters to this. Like, will you want to opt for America Chavez to punish off the back of a very spicy SP2? Wiccan as well as a counter for this one. Juggernaut as well as a counter for this one. Maybe Doctor Doom. But that glancing is going to be something that we'd have to consider how painful that could be. Either way, there's going to be a lot of strong Mystic champions that will be able to take down the champion. And we'll have to see whether or not a buff immunity from Nico or from Black Widow Clairvoyant could be the play with this one. Anyway, what are your thoughts on Carolina Dean? Thoughts in the comments. And yeah, if I can do a review video, I will do that. But thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Bye.